Today we're going to see how to do some data analysis and graphing using Excel 2007, which is slightly different than Excel 2003 and a little bit harder to understand just by trial and error. So we'll start with a bunch of data. In this case, it happens to be data for a projectile lab where you set your projectile launcher to different angles and then launch it and measure the range of your projectile. Here we took 3 trials for each angle. So the first thing we would like to do is to find an average. In Excel, that's simple. If you know the name of the function, which in this case happens to be average, so we hit equals, type in average, which is the name of the function, open the parentheses, select the numbers you would like to take an average of, close parentheses, and hit enter. And there's your average for those 3. It's also nice to take a standard deviation to see how good our trials are. Again, it's just a function in Excel, so I'll hit equals. The name of this function happens to be stdev for standard deviation, open parentheses, select the values, and close parentheses, and hit enter. It's also nice sometimes to take a percent deviation. It's a little bit easier to see if this standard deviation is a decent percentage of our average. Again, it's a little different way of seeing how good our numbers are. So a percent deviation is just equal to the standard deviation divided by the range. And again, I'm not typing in any numbers. I'm clicking on the cells where these numbers lie, and I'll hit enter. And again, this is a percent deviation in a decimal form. Sometimes it's nice to put it in a percent form if you want to see it that way. You can simply go, if you're on the home tab here, under number, there is a percent button. That turns it into a percent. The one last thing I want to do is just put the correct number of significant digits here. I'm going to use 2 for each of these. So to change that, again, you're under the home ribbon, I guess they call it. Go to these 2 number things. This adds decimal places. This takes away decimal places. So I'm going to add 2 to the percent, and I'm going to drop these 2 down to just 2 also. And now I've done this for one value. I can just highlight all 3 of the formulas I put in. If I move the mouse over the corner here where there's a little tiny square, you notice the cursor changes. If I click here and drag it down, I can automatically copy and paste these formulas to all the other rows, and I very quickly have an average, a standard deviation, and a percent deviation for all of my trials. So there's the data analysis part. Now I want to make a graph. This is where the new version of Excel gets a little bit confusing. To create a graph, I'm going to select nothing first, go to insert. And under insert, you can find all these different types of graphs. I'm going to do drop down for scatter plot, and I'm going to go to all chart types. Now you can find the chart type you want. For most types of data analysis, when you're graphing it, you want to do a scatter plot. Don't get tricked by, you might want your plot to look like a line at the end, but it's not really a line plot, it's a scatter plot. And I'm going to choose the one here without any lines on it. And I'm going to hit OK. And initially there's nothing there. It's a blank spot because there's no data. So we want to add some data to it. If I now go up to, again, it automatically selects the design ribbon here. Again, you can select these to change the colors. There's nothing there yet. But if I go to where it says select data, click on that. I want to add a data set. And I'll just call this range for now. And the X values, I want to select the values that are going to be X on my graph, which are going to be the angle values. So I'll click the little arrow drop down, select my angles. For the Y values, those are my average ranges. And you can already see my graph taking shape. And I'm good with that, so I'll hit OK. And hit OK again. So my graph is kind of there already. I might want to clean it up a little bit. So there's a couple other tabs I can go to. If I go to the Layout tab, under Chart Tools up here, I can add labels and things. Let's see. First, I don't need a legend. I only have one piece of data graph, so I can turn the legend off. My chart title is up there. I can just click on it and I can just type in new things. So I want to title this as range versus launch angle. Usually it's Y versus X is what you make your chart title. I'd also like to add some axis labels. So I'll go to axis title, primary horizontal axis, title below the axis, add something there, axis title, primary vertical axis, and I'll do a rotated one that'll put it on the side. Again, I can just click on these and I can add a title here. And usually what you want to do is you give the variable its graph. So this is the angle variable and it's in degrees. So I'll put the unit in parentheses. And over here, it is the angle variable, or the range variable, and it's measured in meters. What you might also want to do is maybe you don't want this line connecting this. The way to get rid of that, if you click on your data, right click on it, click on Format Data Series, you can go through and these are all the options of how your data series looks like. So you can go to, for example, to line style or line color, no line, line disappears. If you want to change your mark, the color of your markers, you can change those. But I just want to get rid of the line for now, so that's fine. So in this case, this is probably fine for this, for the data analysis you would need to do. You may want to do something special in the future. If you want to add your standard deviation numbers to your values here, you can add what's called error bars. If you select your data series, go to Layout, there's a button on the ribbon called Error Bars. If you select that, go down to More Error Bar Options. It allows you to select what the error bars are. Again, they kind of plot your standard deviation or your error on your graph. In this case, we're going to use custom because each of our numbers has a different standard deviation. I'll select custom, specify value, and I can select my standard deviations. So for the positive and negative direction, because this is basically plus or minus one standard deviation, I'll select my standard deviation column. Hit OK. Now here's the really annoying part. So that's his vertical error bars, but maybe you want to put some horizontal error bars also that show the error in your angle measurement. And it looks like there's nowhere to click that. It just says vertical. So what you have to do is you have to actually click back onto your graph, and you notice there are tiny little vertical or horizontal error bars there. You have to select one of those, and now that activates the horizontal error bar numbers. It's a weird thing, but what can you do? So if you think about when you, in this lab, when you set the angle, we set this by hand. There was a basically angle readout that you could adjust your launcher to. And I'm going to say that these are about plus or minus a half a degree. So I'll change this to a fixed value this time, since this was an error in my actual setting of this launcher. I'll say it's about plus or minus half a degree. Hit close, and there my graph is done. And again, my angle measurements, the error is pretty small in them, so you can barely see the error bars there. The vertical error bar measurements, though, represent the standard deviation for my measurements, and they are a little bit bigger. And you are done.